Good morning. Thank you so much for staying tuned to Citizen TV. On this 5th day of June 2022, we bring you this special coverage of the presentation of papers, that is the documentation that Raila Odinga, the presidential candidate of Azimio la Umoja, One Kenya political party, will be making at the IEBC. We are right now live from different locations, including from his current home, where he is making that short journey to the All Saints Cathedral for a church service. And of course, he is expected to be at the IEBC registration of candidate center, that is at the Bomas of Kenya, at 10 a.m. So live on your screen are the images from Karen. And of course, this has been an event that has been expected for many days. Raila Odinga making his 5th stab at the presidency. And I just want to take you quickly through some of the major events that have happened, because this is a race that has been defined continuously through different months. Remember that in January 10th of, or rather December 10th of 2021, Raila Odinga announced to the nation that he was going to contest for the presidency a 5th time. And of course, at that time, he was at the Kasarani Stadium. And of course, speaking to the very expectant congregation that was there. And now in January, that is the time that Raila Odinga continued to hold several Azimio la Umoja meetings across the country, listening to the people and taking their views and saying that he was going to bring them on board as he goes to this political journey. Then on February 26th of this year, there were several NDCs, that is the National Delegates Conferences or conventions of different political parties that form the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition political party, including ODM and the Jubilee Party. And then on the 12th of March, that is the day that all the constituent parties of that movement met to declare that they were going to support Raila Odinga as the sole presidential candidate of that political party or coalition political party. And then on the 9th of April, that is when Azimio la Umoja coalition political party was registered as a coalition political party, the very first one of such kind, of course, coming after the passage of the Political Parties Amendment Bill, and now an act. It was passed early in the year and heralded the creation of that political party, bringing together over 20 political parties. So that was on the 9th of April. And then on the 16th of May, that is when Raila Odinga named his running mate, that is Martha Karua, and it has been about 20 days since that declaration was made. Again, another move that really defined this race to State House of the year 2022. And of course, during that time, there has been several conversations within the political circles, and of course, within the Azimio la Umoja movement, some of the disagreements that have been reported, but essentially coming to the point that now Raila Odinga is making that journey that you see on TV, on your screen, moving from Karen to move to the All Saints Cathedral, where there will be that event, prayers, and thereafter they should be moving to the Bomas of Kenya to present their papers. Of course, several presidential candidates have already or the aspirants have already presented their papers. The very first one to be cleared was Walter Mongare. You may know him from his comedy career, but now he believes he's the right person to become the 5th president of this country. The second person was Professor George Wajakoya of the Roots Party. He had had some hiccups earlier in the process, but eventually was cleared by the IEBC to contest the presidency. The third person was David Maure Wahiga of the Agano political party. He was cleared yesterday, just a few minutes before William Ruto of the UDA party was cleared by the IEBC. And of course, now Raila Odinga, if he is cleared by the IEBC, he will become the 5th presidential aspirant to be cleared by the IEBC to contest for the presidency. Of course, each of these men, because all of them are men actually, they are seeking to be the 5th president of the Republic of Kenya to succeed one President Uhuru Kenyatta, whose term ends with a general election scheduled for this year on the 9th of August. And of course, it's been quite a countdown. Now we are close to 60 days to the election. Of course, starting 9th of this month. It will be just about 61 days to the election, time that is quite critical, especially for the political parties and presidential candidates at that time, because after tomorrow, at the conclusion of the clearance of presidential aspirants, they'll excuse me, they will all be presidential candidates. And of course, after the 7th of June, all the aspirants in all the seats that will have been cleared will be candidates. So it is the season of the official campaign season. I'm not alone in studio because we'll be at different locations, from Karen, from Bomas of Kenya, from the All Saints Cathedral, and later on we'll be attending a rally that will be hosted shortly after clearance of the candidate. I just want to remind you that we have so many more aspirants that will be presenting themselves before the IBC, including Dr. Ekuru Okot of the Third Way Alliance. And of course, tomorrow there's another list of aspirants that will be presenting themselves before the IBC, including Jeru Kathangu of Ford Asili, Jim Wanjigi of the Safina Party, and some independent aspirants that I'll be telling you about. But here in studio I have Irene Soila, who is a program advisor on electoral governance at the Kenya Human Rights Commission. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Great, and it's good to have you here. And as we begin this journey, what has been your learning, the lessons that you've seen so far? Because we started with some 54, 55 presidential aspirants. Then we got a short list of about 18. So far now, we only have 4 presidential candidates. If Raila Odinga is cleared, becomes the 5th. And of course, some more aspirants that are to present themselves, including Dr. Ekuru Okot, the IEBC. What have you learned so far?
That Kenya is a democracy, that everyone is entitled to vie for whichever position that they want to, and that they have an opportunity to, be the president or whichever position that they envision being in this country. So it is a matter of just taking the bold step to present yourself, to present your ideologies to the country, because Kenya is a country that is accommodative to all of us, and we are open to have whichever president that is ready for Kenya.
Right.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's a lesson to say that Kenyans are open for any kind of candidate or whoever who becomes our president. Yeah.
Very, very interesting. And of course, just to bring you up to speed of what is scheduled today, Honorable Raila Odinga is expected at 10 a.m. at the IEBC. Dr. Ekuru Okot is scheduled to appear at 2 p.m. He's from the Third Way Alliance. George Munyota is an independent presidential aspirant. He's expected at the IEBC Bomas of Kenya Center. That is at 3 p.m. Then tomorrow, the final day of the excuse me, that is gazetted for consideration of presidential aspirants. We have Jim Wanjigi of the Safina Party at 11 a.m. Mudhora Karriera, an independent presidential aspirant, at 2 p.m. You may remember him from 2017 when he was in the race as running mate of one gentleman by the name Kaluyu, Japhet Kaluyu, was the presidential aspirant. And then Jeru Kathangu of the Ford Asili political party is expected tomorrow at 3 p.m. And so these are the short journeys that the aspirants have to make to the Bomas of Kenya, but each of them chooses a different route to use, or how they begin the day, who accompanies them to the Bomas of Kenya, the things they say, because they also know that Kenyans are watching and they would want to listen to what message that they have. But when you look at the clearance process by the IEBC, reducing that list to what it is now, these requirements, are they too stringent or they are fair to presidential aspirants? Because you've had some of the aspirants saying that you've been a bit tough on us. The governor of Murang'a, that is Mongio Iria, saying that it appears that there's an intention to really bar him, to block him, that they have taken away his signatures. Are the requirements too stringent, or we need that?
I think we need the requirements to be met from where I sit, and the fact that we have, as per our laws, that we have provided, this is the threshold. It is just important that we follow and get, cleared based on the threshold that has been given, but also looking at what is practical and what is not practical, because there are things that sometimes you might require that may not necessarily be practical. For example, getting IDs from all Kenyans. I mean, that may not be practical because Kenya sometimes is a country that, you know, our data is misused. So you must also be very careful when you're giving data to the people. So we must also be looking at the threshold that is more practical, the threshold that is not also going to be, you know, limiting to the people. But the fact that also having a very big number of presidential candidates is only going to, you know, to open up the space, but also to, you know, give it more confusion to the voters.
So what is the requirement here? Is it to frustrate so that you reduce the size of the ballot paper, or is to put requirements that really tell the country these are leaders that are ready for the presidency and they can actually convince a sizable number of supporters?
It shouldn't be more about the quantity but the quality. So you can have so many that do not meet the threshold, and then you are simply giving us a pool that is not even ready to give us the best. So we want the best. So if you meet the criteria, it's because you are among the best that we're looking for in this country. So for us, it is looking at what is the threshold, what is the law, what does the law say, vis-a-vis what have you been able to provide, without necessarily also reducing the number. But if the number reduces, the better. I mean, for any voter, anyway, any voter, it's the better, because then it is sort of gives you a room to even think critically about the leaders that we have. Sometimes when the pool is too long, even though you want to have a particular leader, you look at the scenario that presents. It presents more of a pool that is not necessarily qualified to be in the, you know, in the presidential race.
Right. Okay, and of course, if you're wondering what the checklist looks like that candidates have to comply with at the IEBC when they go to the Bomas of Kenya, what IEBC, the commissioners and the staff they are looking for is first, electronic and printed copies of the supporters' signatures in the prescribed form. And this means that they have to have at least 2,000 supporting signatures from majority of the counties, which means at least 24. And all of them have to be accompanied by copies of their identity cards, such that when it comes to verification, that this 48,000, that is 24 times 2,000, they are Kenyans, registered voters, then it becomes easy. And of course, previously it was not a necessity to provide copies of the IDs, and that has been one of the biggest hurdles for many aspirants across this country, especially the independent aspirants who may not have who may have the challenges of reaching as many people as they may want. The second item that presidential aspirants must meet is certified copies of the academic qualifications documents from a university recognized in Kenya. So whatever degree you have, it must have been certified, whether it's by the issuing organization, but also the Commission of University Education. And of course, this means that, of course, in the Constitution, a presidential candidate must have a university degree. Number 3 is that you must have a certified copy of the national identification document or passport that the candidate used to register as a voter. And I'm sure this also applies to the running mate candidate. Then passport size photograph on a white background, both hard copy and soft copy. And this is essential because after this, IEBC will be now processing the ballot papers. So those ballot papers will have the photo, especially of the presidential candidate. Then number 5 is the certificate of nomination, which is from the political party. For instance, if you're from a political party, then you need that. For independent candidates, you don't need that because you are not nominated by a political party. Number 6 is that you have to have duly signed political party code of conduct as prescribed in the second schedule to the Elections Act. Then you need to have the duly filled nomination form, that is Form 12. This is in accordance with the law, the Act and the regulations. And then names of a proposer and a seconder who shall be registered members of the candidate's party and shall sign the nomination form. So for instance, if you're a candidate of ODM, the proposer and the seconder must be from ODM. Number 9 is that
very well, thank you.
You need a statutory declaration for purposes of nomination for election, that is Form 13, which is also needed by the IEBC. You need a nomination fee of 200,000 shillings. That is, you deposit it with a banker's check, then you present it to the IEBC. And then you also need statutory declaration evidencing moral and ethical requirements under the Leadership and Integrity Act and Chapter 6 of the Constitution. So this is what many people would call Ecc Clearance. And this is a form you fill at the Ecc, and it's stamped as received. And then you go with a copy to the IEBC. Then you also must present a campaign schedule. And the essence is that IEBC, upon receiving the campaign schedules of all these presidential aspirants, now candidates, they'll be in a position to reconcile them to ensure that the routes or the routes do not cross each other, especially while they are on the campaign trail. So that's the procession. Raila Odinga heading to the All Saints Cathedral, now currently on the Gong Road. They'll be making that turn to be in a position to head towards the All Saints Cathedral. Of course, most likely they'll use the Valley Road and drop down to Kenyatta Avenue, make the turn, and get into the All Saints Cathedral for a prayer service, after which they will be expected to go to the Bomas of Kenya. Remember that the scheduled time, as per the schedule of IEBC, is that they have to be at the Bomas of Kenya at 10 a.m. Joining us now is Professor Peter Kagwanja. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
And it's good to see you.
You too.
We had just started, talking about what we've been seeing since the start of this processing of presidential aspirants. What have you learned so far that you'd want to share with the people?
I think our democracy is expanding. Those of us who were there in the 1970s, 80s, and the 90s, you just saw heads of state, the president heads of state coming with boxes of endorsement in public, and then they are handed over, and the next thing is you're sworn in. Now we're seeing a more detailed, more demanding process, which means our democracy is deepening, and we also, coming of age. So I think that's a broad lesson, because if you compare where we're coming from and where we are, then you can see there's progress.
Right.
At the same time, I think the pendulum might have swung too wildly to the extreme, that we've not really put serious criteria of what a president and a deputy president need to have. And I see a gap there. For example, yes, you'll submit 2,000 names of those endorsing you from across the country. But what evidence do we have that you have experience of living across the country? If you compare with some countries that are basing themselves on the serious idea of building a nation, take for example China. If you have to be a presidential candidate or a member of the top ruling, rank, which they call Politburo, you must have, you must show, evidence that you have worked elsewhere and served for no less than 10 years outside your place of birth. It's a serious condition, so that you prove your citizenship. I think at this level, we are still at this, cosmetic way of, you need advancement from 24 out of 47 counties. You need, people to endorse you in this. Your party need to have offices in this kind of thing. I think we need to get deeper into this, so that we create the Kenyan. And the person who come to govern over us is a true Kenyan. He can tell at least 3/4 of our country by what he has done outside his village.
Do you agree with that? Because I know in the old constitution, should I even call it that, the requirement was that you needed to be at least 35 years of age, right? Right now, you just need to be a registered voter and qualified to be a member of parliament. Do you need to expand the requirements, as he says?
Well, I think we have not exhausted the requirements that we have already currently, but I like the fact that it's coming from a historical point of view. Some of us may not have the history, but at least we can already see that there's something good that the democracy has, as opposed to what in the 90s was. So the thing of having a deeper having a deeper analysis of the requirements is necessary, but then the question is, how practical are we? For me, mostly is, are we more practical? Are we looking at a scenario where we bar probably the very young ones? Because today it's just being a voter of age that requires, that is the best requirement for you to be, you know, in an aspirant or even a presidential candidate. So are we looking at also accommodating every person when we are putting all these criteria? For me, it's more to bar. It will be more barring because there are people who are living the current, there are people who are living the history, so we need to meet somewhere. Yeah.
I'm just looking at Article 137 of the Constitution, Qualifications and Disqualifications for Election as President. And a person qualifies for nomination as a presidential candidate if the person is a citizen by birth, is qualified to stand for election as Member of Parliament, is nominated by a political party or is an independent candidate, and is nominated by not fewer than 2,000 voters from each of a majority of the counties. And a person is not qualified for nomination as a presidential candidate if the person owes allegiance to a foreign state. So that obviously locks out a dual citizenship citizen, and is a public officer or is acting in any state or other public office, meaning they would need to resign. But of course, that exempts the president, the deputy president, and a member of parliament. So meaning, wait, even a governor cannot stand for election as president?
Yeah.
Is that so?
If you have been a governor.
No, if you're sitting governor now,
no, you can't.
You can't contest.
Yeah, because you already have an executive position. You are an executive.
Is that why Mwangi Iria was?
No, he's. Yeah, I don't think that's the reason, but he's a.
Because I'm reading, a person is not qualified for nomination as a presidential candidate if the person is a public officer or is acting in any state or other public office. But now, Article 3 says that Clause 2B, the one that I just read, shall not apply to the president, the deputy president, or a member of parliament. It doesn't include a governor.
Yeah, that's a raccoon. We might have to look. We might have to look at it.
Okay, all right. Of course, we learn many things, but when you look at that qualification, then, in your view, apart from, of course, now on your screen you'll see that presidential aspirant of the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Alliance, Raila Odinga, has made his way to the All Saints Cathedral. He's just about to getting into the church so that the procession and the prayers can begin. And I have to say here that this is different. We haven't seen this before, of any presidential aspirant attending a church service. Usually a prayer service, maybe there are places of residence. What does this tell us, Prof?
Well, there has been a lot of, how do I say it, regionalization of our politics. In other words, the line between the secular and what you'd call the church, or the domain of faith, is being blurred by this particular campaign. Because there is a lot of, throwing mud at others, saying they are not God-loving, they are not very church-going, they are not like this. And the church has become a big issue. Whether you attend, whether you contribute to the church and all that, is beginning to become a kind of a condition. It's not part of what IEBC is looking at. But it is what, getting to the public domain as a qualification as to whether you are electable or not electable, whether you're a good candidate or not a good candidate. So church going is a big issue. And you get all these issues like, the difference between, the president, the deputy president, sorry to bring that here, is that the president does not go to church anymore. The deputy is the one who is always going to churches. And then you move to the Raila, he's not very church-going or no. Is he an atheist and that kind of a thing? Or Kalonzo is very faithful, is church-going and all that. Mother, is he going? There is a lot of judgment about the church, and therefore it's important strategically to clear that handle by saying that you are capable of going to church.
Capable of going to church. That's interesting. But Irene, what do you think is this? That I covered the presidential, that time it was nomination of 2017, and I spoke to all the aspirants that were coming to the IBC for clearance. And at that time, we didn't have, just before proceeding to the KCC that time, that they would have to attend such a church service, maybe because some of them did not appear on a Sunday. But what does it tell us about our politics and religion?
Yeah, it tells us that, first of all, Kenya is a religious country, regardless, and that we tend to cleanse those who are associated with the religion, regardless of what they do, regardless of what they have been in the leadership space. So long as they're in church, so long as they are associated with preaching, with the prayers, with the singing, then we are cleansing. They're good people. Okay? And that, for us, we are unable to separate religion and leadership. Those are two different things. It doesn't matter whether you go to church or not. You can be a leader. Okay? So because of that, for me, the church going is more campaign. It is not about your leadership that we are expecting in this country. It's a campaign tool which we have seen as the most effective from a politician's point of view, and that if we well utilized, then it gives you more leverage. So for me, this is more campaign than it is about religion, than it is about. It is a space that people feel comfortable, that you are associated with us because you come to church. We don't necessarily look at what you do after church or even when you live there. So for me, it's...
Or even what you say.
Yes. It is a campaign from the politician, but also an empathetic point from the voter.
Okay. And of course, as you continue to follow the proceedings at the All Saints Cathedral, like I told you, right now they are inside the church. They're expecting that the prayer service will begin, or the Sunday service will begin, so that after that, then they will make that journey to the Bomas of Kenya. I haven't seen Martha Karua, the running mate of Raila Odinga. Maybe she has different plans, but we'll also be waiting to see from the images there on what is happening. And of course, it's a very special day, especially for the country, as we count down the days to the general election. This being the 5th of June 2022, it's just a day before the conclusion of that process of clearing the presidential aspirants. And Raila Odinga is not just the only person who is expected to appear before IBC this morning. We also know that Dr. Kuru Okot of the Third Way Alliance will be making his way, scheduled for 2 p.m. George Munyot, an independent presidential aspirant, scheduled for 3 p.m. today. Jim Wanjigi is scheduled for tomorrow, 11 a.m. Muthiora Carriera, independent, scheduled for 2 p.m. tomorrow, and Jeru Kathango for the Sili, scheduled for 3 p.m. Tomorrow, and then that will be the close of that exercise. Any person who is aggrieved by the presidential registration of candidates has up to 9th of June to file any appeals before the IBC, and then they'll sit, make a determination, and if anyone is dissatisfied from that decision, they will have a window to go ahead and file an appeal at the High Court. And of course, time is ticking. And at this time, as we count down, where would you say we are at in terms of preparations, and more specifically on the campaign trail, as these political movements make their pitch to the people?
Well, I think the complexities of our democracy and the turning of the wheel is beginning to become familiar with those of us in public. We started off at the party level, the party primaries, not as elaborate, not as democratic as those of the Americans, not as rigorous in terms of campaign, but in terms of being taken seriously from a legal perspective. No, not really. I've been at them, so that one you perhaps you know, been vying for senatorial seat in Muranga County, so I'm speaking from experience. The primaries are, it's not even work in progress. It's work that need to be started. The primaries in Kenya, and yet it's really the nursery where our political leaders are nurtured. So if we don't have a good beginning from the nursery, then the quality of leadership that will come to the top is going to be a little bit questionable. Then we moved from the primaries and came now to the political party. And that became a little bit more rigorous in terms of the requirements, and the legal requirements, and even the seriousness of the exercise, because the parties and their candidates are scrutinized and so on. Then we handed the baton now to the IEBC, and we can comfortably say now that this is now the tenor of IEBC, and it is a totally rigorous process, from the requirements to the timings to the hour to the date. Then from IEBC, I think from the 9th of August, then we might hand over to now the transition authority, or the Supreme Court of Kenya. That goes there, and from there, then we have the swearing in, and then we come back to the governing. It is in line with how conceptually the life cycle of a country, if you wish, the cycle of a country is election time and governing time.
Right.
Governing time is supposed to be around in Kenya 4 years, and election time or campaign time 1 year. Obviously, we have blurred that line now, because some will start immediately after the election.
It is way longer than that.
Yes, but you can see we have been governing. That's why the key actor during that period has been President Uhuru Kenyatta and his government.
Okay. And actually, if you look at the presidential election of 2017, of course, the first election, or the general election, was on the 8th of August. But we didn't conclude that until 28th of November, when President Kenyatta was actually inaugurated for the second term. Then for him to form his government, it took him all the way close to February, when his cabinet secretaries were being sworn in. So you look at that, it's almost 6 months between the election and the time that you actually establish a government. But of course, the campaign season has begun way earlier. If you had to say the official period is from the end of May that year, so that, again, that takes you to about 8 plus 2, that is 10 months. If you had to say between the time that IBC gazetted the election period, sometime in March, then it makes it close to a year. Is it necessary? Can we do better with a shorter time?
Oh yes, we can do better with a shorter time, but also I think we have nurtured a culture, whether it's negative culture, where we are always in the political space. We have no time for development, I think. And if you remember very well, after 2017 inauguration of that parliament or the government, we immediately saw politicians start campaigning for 2022, like immediately. We were not even given time, or Kenyans were not given time to, first of all, dissect the 2017. And of course, the rerun of the 2017, caused lots of confusion and some form of, a fragile government, a fragile country that required more time to scan through the 2017. We needed to look at what went wrong for us and how can we make it better for 2022. That we did not give it time. We quickly jumped into the 2022 agenda without looking back and trying to unpack the 2017 so that we don't go back there. So we have chances of a cyclic situation of not really addressing the question of our electoral processes, because we do not give ourselves time to look back and see what worked for us, what did not work for us. And that kind of culture then does not give us the best, or we do not build a democracy that can stand and to withstand the challenges that come with the electoral processes. So we must understand that we need to think, taking back to what Prof has said, even looking at the party primaries, we really did not have party primaries. We got a sham of activities that happened that gave us to the, the kind of people. And one thing you must understand is that party primaries are, are the determinant of who becomes the, the leader.
Where was the sham? Because some political parties went to voting, what they call universal suffrage. Others decided to make a decision, whether it's by consensus, whether it's by opinion polls. We don't know who commissioned them or who executed them. Where was the sham, in your view?
So first, the consensus, that kind of mode of selection was not communicated to the public. The Kenyans, the electorate did not know that we have a consensus process. It came through a Political Parties Act that was amended and immediately put into implementation just before we could even understand what it is by Kenyans and how then they can be able to, engage effectively. So that became a problem because even when because I monitored the party primaries, and when voters went to the party primaries, most of them thought they were even going to, have to elect the president, the governors, blah, blah, blah. But you realize that in most that took the popular vote process, there were only MCA positions. The rest had gone through consensus, delegates, blah, 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 without necessarily letting Kenyans know. Even in the 2017 party primaries, the younger people never voted because the list that were being used in the party primaries were lists for 2017. Meaning, anyone who registered after 2017 to 2022 did not participate in the party primaries.
And yet, the new law, as amended, says that the only persons who should participate in a party primary election should be the registered members of a political party.
Exactly. And also, in fact, one of the things that even shocked is that came in one of the stations, the polling centers that I went to, came an aspirant and the wife, but they couldn't vote for themselves because they were not in the list. So what does that mean? The 2017 list. You see, when you are
which party was this?
UDA mostly, because UDA. I was in.
Because are they members of UDA?
Yes.
They should vote because they're members of the party.
So the party used the 2017 list, in fact IEBC list, the 2017 IEBC list, not the party list, because ideally the party list should be updated up to 2022. So you should have everyone who registered even after 2017. So if you use the 2017 list for IEBC, then it means you've locked out the bigger majority of the youth who have others who are even aspirants. So for me, that was a clear indication that we were not even ready for party primaries, and then what that translates to when it comes to the general elections.
Okay. Yeah. And Prof, so what do we do? Because there has been a warning before that you shouldn't start working on election laws very close to an election, but that's what you do best, actually, the contrary. So what do we do? Because you pass laws, the political class tells you this is difficult to implement. But the same politicians are in parliament and they're the ones who actually pass that. Then you get to a point that, like she's saying here, that you have passed a law that political party members are the only ones that should participate in a nomination, in the nominations, but that is not implemented. Is that illegal? What should happen?
Well, I think first and foremost, let me move back a little bit.
Okay.
We need to congratulate ourselves for committing ourselves and the nation to a democratic process. So the rest is the judgment as to whether that commitment is fulfilled sufficiently or to the satisfaction of the citizenry. And therefore, we have adopted a presidential system, that which I said has 2 cycles, and to which we must be committed. The cycle 1 is, of course, the election time. And the cycle 2 is the governing time, that I said before. Now, also what we're discussing now is the election time, which in our case is 1 year to have completed our elections within that particular year. And one of the things that I like about the new constitution and what it has provided is the fact that we have overcome some of the personal whims that used to dominate our election period. For example, in the time of Mzee Moi, you used to be told this is a hidden card, or this is my secret card. meaning the date when the election is going to take place would be debated in Parliament and elsewhere to no end. And finally, it will be the president who will determine when the election will take place, and all the time to his advantage or advantage of his peers. Now, that is now gone. So there is some form of certainty in terms of the dating. I do recall you asked whether we are not spending so much time in this. It is the wheel that we've agreed upon that requires what we are doing. For example, we've talked about primaries. Those are important. Then you come to what you'd call the parties, the party formations, and the compliance of political parties to the law. And this is where one of the problems we will have to highlight later on, which is now we are beginning to get more individual parties. Kenya has more parties than any other country in the world because parties are not national. They are individualized. They are almost individual companies where you are a shareholder or you're not a shareholder. It is not stated as such, but this is what you find. Particularly when you amplify this notion of loyalty, meaning there can never be any dissent in a political party. I remember, I have to indulge the personal. In the primaries, I had 73% from the poll. My competition had 28%. It's in the public domain. So I'm quoting the figure that you are familiar with. But I was disqualified on the basis that I'm not a party royalist. Somebody said I had come from the Democratic Party, which is Kibaki's party, and jumped into Uhuru's party, and I'm not an Uhuru man. You get the point? So then you begin to ask, I paid...
Were you involved in that discussion?
Why?
Were you involved in that discussion that arrived at that...
Yes, I was in the Windsor so-called consensus building process, and I was told I'm a DP person. Although I had paid for Jubilee to 250,000, that's almost 2 acres, depending on where you're buying your land, and I had paid membership. I knew my membership number by memory. I had not been a member of any other party. As a scholar, I have never, ever been a member of any other party. The first party I joined was Jubilee because at this time I had political ambition.
When did you join it?
Because I had political ambition. When? I wanted to be this year. Jubilee also was launched this year, if you remember, in KICC. So I'm saying...
It was a relaunch, Prof.
Yeah, it was a relaunch, but the symbols are different. We had a dove handshake, and this is a dove now, the colors and all. Anyway, to get the specifics, the party primaries and membership to the political party is still the business, the unfinished business. We've got to finish it. And I'm not the only one. They complain. You'll be shocked that this year we have in Parliament more independents than members of political parties. Read my lips. This is what is going to happen. The next thing we've got to take care of is during the main election, we have to take into the account that our Constitution provides for either first-time victory or a runoff. Now, that was a big debate about Kalonzo Musyoka and the Azimio, or whether he's going to be independent or he's join Azimio. Because if he goes independent, you have no certainty that we're not going to go for a runoff, which means we'll have another 2 years. We have never had a runoff in this country. But in 2017, the ruling of the court had the same impact as a runoff. Only that the competition did not agree. Not all the people agreed to go for the runoff. Raila Odinga was not for the runoff. Uhuru Kenyatta was not for runoff. Uhuru could have taken...
I'm not sure you can strictly call it a runoff, because a runoff is where the top 2 presidential aspirants go back to the election.
That's what I'm saying.
But that was totally a repeat. Every presidential candidate actually went to the ballot.
That's why I'm saying that we've never had a runoff in this country since we launched the 2010 Constitution. But the 2017 double elections almost had the same impact as a runoff, because it's the same candidates going for the early election in order to comply with the law as stipulated by the Supreme Court. So that takes time. This is the point we're trying to make, that we cannot avoid the fact that from time to time down the centuries, as we go on with our democratic process, we'll have to go for a runoff at one point or another, or that the election will be too close to call to the point that it gets there.
Right.
Then we move to the swearing in. You have to provide sufficient time. In 2013, when President Kibaki was handing over to President Uhuru Kenyatta, you saw the rhythms of, meeting diplomats. You have to meet whatever. You have to, there is that provision, which is almost a month or 2 months, so that you are acquainted with the government. And then previously, there was this argument, accusation that governments are swearing themselves in when they are not even democratically elected. That was a crisis we had in 2007. In order to avoid that, and you say the swearing must be public, it must occur by not later than noon, and it must be presided upon by the Chief Justice and so on. And it's a very detailed legal requirement of how in order to avoid. So what is the point? We are dealing with the skeletons in our own history. Yeah. From the time of Mzee Moi and Mzee Kenyatta to the time of Mzee Kibaki. So those are the skeletons we've been trying to do by basically subjecting our electoral process to a very rigorous, legal requirements. And that is why we are here today, to see now Raila Odinga, the former Prime Minister, complying to now another set of requirements before he now gets into his formal campaign. Right.
And I'm looking, of course, we're still at different locations, including the All Saints Cathedral. You'll see the procession there into the All Saints. Just a few minutes ago, Raila Odinga made his way into the grounds of All Saints Cathedral. And recently, a few weeks ago, he told the people that I'm actually Anglican, end of quote. And today appears to be that day that he confirms to the country of what he was saying. So you don't know how long the church service will take. But then on the left of your screen, you see the images from the Bomas of Kenya. Appears as set in as far as preparing for the sitting areas of the different personalities that will be getting there. And of course, IBC has been here since the 29th of May, that is Sunday last week, listening to different presidential aspirants, some of them dissatisfied, them complaining, some have been barred from accessing the location, and they have gone out to complain to the public or before the media about the conduct of IBC. I'm speaking specifically about Mwangi Iria and another gentleman by the name Kamau, who said he had traveled from Australia, Melbourne, come to Kenya to be a presidential candidate. He didn't have very kind words for the IEBC chairperson, Wafula Chebukati, but it is what it is. He was not allowed to contest for these elections. So those are the pictures that will be sure to keep you reminded. And Irene, I'm looking at this election. Yes, we have about 82, 83 political parties. Those that are compliant in this election could be about 80, maximum 82 in terms of what was required of them. But then again, we have what you'd say 4 movements. First, there's Kenya Kwanza, led by William Ruto. There's another one, Ukombozi or Majimbo, which is a coalition that was registered with the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties. Then there's Eagles National Alliance, again registered. Then you have the Azimio la Umoja, One Kenya Coalition Political Party, which is the only coalition political party in this election. So then what does this say about our political party democracy? We have, like he says, individual parties. Then they still find they can't survive by themselves. They have to come together to form these bigger movements. What does this say? Do we need to now get to the point of reducing the number of political parties, and what needs to be done, especially for the governance of these political parties, to change this conversation?
What Prof said is true, that most of these political parties are personalized. They are personal outfits that are, though vehicles to, you know, lead us into the electoral process or to give us, you know, a card that will take us to the next level, they tend to also limit us, because a political party which is owned by an individual, it is at their discretion to decide whether to give you the running or not. It is at their discretion to even call you a mole of another political party, because it is not an institution as it should be. Our laws do not envision political parties that are individuals' outfits. It envisions political parties that are institutions, which is where we need to go, because then they are governed differently. They are not governed by the emotions of the individuals who own them. They are governed by the fact that these are the requirements of our political parties and we should abide by them. So whatever we have today is those personalized outfits. And then you also realize that our political parties, and this is the very unfortunate that we have continued over time, they are ethnicized. That Jubilee is affiliated to a particular community, ODM is affiliated to a particular community, which again, that in itself limits, because it doesn't give us a national platform. It gives us a platform that is, you have to be aligned to a particular community to be a member of that. That is why with Audacity you realize that some Kenyans will not vie from a Jubilee party, for example, if they are coming from a particular area in this country. Will not vie if they are coming from in an UBDA party, if they are coming. So those are the
Erin, just to cut you short, remember I asked a question about Martha Karua, and how she's arriving at the All Saints Cathedral, accompanied by different leaders, including Peter Kenneth and one minor commander, a nominated MP and former Member of Parliament of Starehe. And then, of course, Raila Odinga is behind there. And, of course, accompanied by different leaders. And they will be now getting into the church for the start of that service. I am not very certain about how long it takes for a church service at All Saints Cathedral, unless any of you knows.
You're getting yourself into trouble.
Because
you should know.
No, I don't worship there, so I don't know. But anyway, ours is to wait and see how long that takes. And like I told you earlier on, this is the first time we are seeing such development. So we'll shortly be taking a few minutes just to listen to what the church service is like as soon as we see a bit of action from that. For now, they're just settling down. Irene, you were saying something related to how eventually we end up collapsing political parties into smaller movements or formations.
Yeah, so then now we move into political, like I was saying, that now political parties are personalized. They are also affiliated to particular communities and all that. But also you realize, even as that is the current situation, we may not be able to go to the next level, especially when you're seeking for a presidential position with a party that is owned by, you know, the law is clear that whoever who becomes the president should be a person of national standards, you know, and national standards means that you must have inroads to all communities in this country. So the issue around coalitions are, you know, necessitated by the fact that, one, you cannot be able to run alone if you are seeking for especially a presidential position.
But does it change the ownership? Because you just said the political parties are owned by particular individuals. When you form a coalition, does that change?
No, it doesn't change. What it does is that it also brings you to another level where you are negotiating for positions or whatever cake that is going to be available at that level. So you continue having your force as a party, but then you're coming to a table where there are other parties which are sharing a cake. So when you're coming with your force, with your muscle of your party to negotiate a particular a particular interest that you have. Then that leads you to it advantages you for the fact that then you are likely to win, and you will get these positions or whatever that you have been able to negotiate. Or you are also going to, I mean, there's a loser and there's also a winner, but all of them are in coalitions to try and raise their possibility of getting into this. So coalitions are important, but then they are limiting in the sense that it is in that coalition that you are going to demand for 1, 2, 3 things. The question then that begs is, these coalitions, have they left out others? In the fact that we are community, I mean, what is it called? Ethnic-based parties. What about those communities that are very, very small, may not have the force,
minorities,
may not, the very minority, the very marginalized? Where do you place them? The Constitution is clear, and it has given us, a platform where everyone, regardless of your scope or your community situation, at least it recognizes that we have the very small marginalized communities and that everyone must be on the table. So in most cases, those communities are left out because you do not have the numbers, So you can only get what is, at the mercy of those that believe that they can give you something, but not really because you deserve to be on the table.
Great. And Prof, as you make your contribution there, what do you think the new constitution has done, especially for the representation of the interests of, first, the minorities, then second, marginalized? Because as far as persons with disabilities, women and youth, at least there's some progress, you'd say. But for the minorities and marginalized, what would you say has been the gain so far?
Obviously, the new constitution was very sensitive about that, particularly women, youth, and people living with disabilities, and therefore they've been given slots in particular in Senate and in nominations by political parties. But look, they have to be nominated by political parties, and therefore they have to be affiliated to that. And there is a lot of tokenism rather than anything else. So again, as we try to perfect our democracy, this is another area to look at. I do know that there are many of the people living with disabilities who are forced, basically by circumstances, to go and vie, so that at least they are noticed that they are there. Hopefully, when political parties will then nominate them as party loyalists. I have a lot of problems with the question of loyalty to a political party, interpreted as basically subservience rather than a critical engagement with the larger agenda of the Kenyan nation. Because if we go by the way parties are structured, I like the way Irene has laid it out. First, we must admit that all parties in this country are tribal. They trace their origin and roots from certain regions or tribes. And normally, the tribes that have dominated are the big five. The big five are from Mount Kenya, Nyanza, then Western, and Lower Eastern combined. Those have been the dominant. We have smaller parties from other regions, Coast, Northeastern, and so on, but the dominant parties have come from there. Then they wake up in the morning, and these parties that are not actually, do not belong to the tribe. They belong to individuals within that tribe. And because they are registered and promoted by personalities who have the money to sell their parties in the region, they masquerade as tribal parties but they are personal parties. Now, the problem then comes that your tribe by itself cannot win an election. Why? Because Kenya is a country of minorities. Yeah. The largest community we have are the Kikuyus. They are 17% of the total population. So you have now to come to the next level of coalition building. Now, the irony of it all, and here I'm speaking as a scholar, is that the forums where these issues are discussed are not very different from horse trading by ethnic kingpins. It's horse trading. And therefore the questions are asked, what are you bringing in? Are you bringing in numbers or bringing in money?
Right.
The two you've got to bring. So coalition, that's why coalition building has been such a difficult thing, because there is no objective criteria as to why one should be or should not be in the coalition, except that you either are bringing numbers or bringing in money.
If you have both, the better.
If you have both, the better. No, you sit in comfortably.
Okay. I wanted us to listen to the proceedings at the All Saints Cathedral, if we can hear that.